So this is Mr. Anderson, and I'm going to do a little deal on plant transport, otherwise what I like to be known as the Xylem and Phloem Show. Anyway, as we look at a piece of wood, so we're taking it from the side, if we were to go from the outside of the tree to the inside of the tree, we've got cork on the outside, which essentially protects the tree. We've then got cork cambium underneath that, which makes new cork. Inside that we've got phloem, and then we have what's called the vascular cambium, and then we have xylem on the inside. So again, going from the inside now to the outside, we've got xylem. The newest xylem is going to be laid down right here, and it's laid down by a layer of cells called the vascular cambium. So that's a lateral meristem. In other words, it's tissue inside that tree that's actually laying down new tissue. So it lays down xylem on the inside and phloem on the outside. Xylem, remember, moves water. Phloem on the outside is going to move sugars. Outside that we have the cork cambium, which it makes new cork to protect the tree. And so let's talk about those two things. As far as plant transport goes, you need to know what xylem is and how it works, and then you need to know what phloem is and then essentially how that works. There are two types of cells that are xylem. They are vessel elements, which are going to be a little bit bigger, and then we have tracheids, which are going to be thin and tapered. Now they're all connected. In other words, there's a connecting pathway that goes all the way from the bottom of that tree or the bottom of that plant and through that vascular tissue all the way up until the top. The interesting thing about xylem is that it's dead. In other words, it's non-living tissue. How does this work? At least the principles that cause it to work. This is transpiration. What is transpiration? Transpiration is going to be evaporation. You can think of it that way. So evaporation from the leaves. Anything that makes water evaporate more quickly, in other words, wind or heat or light, anything that does that is going to make transpiration go more quickly. And so now in this picture right here, we're zoomed into a leaf. Here's that stomata. And here's water leaving the xylem. Now why is it leaving the xylem? It's because there's way less water concentration or a much lower water potential value in the air than there's going to be inside the xylem. So it's moving from an area of high water concentration to low water concentration, or it's just evaporating off the leaf. As it does that, there's a connection of water molecules all the way down through that xylem, all the way down to those roots. So how did the water get in here? Well, the water was absorbed through the roots. What's moving it in that direction? Well, there's essentially two things that are moving in that direction. One, as water is moving away through transpiration to the leaves, that decreases the water, or the amount of water here, and that allows more water to flow in. The other thing that moves it in is osmotic pressure, and so we have a higher solute concentration in here than we do in the soils, and so water in the soils is actually moving from a high water concentration to a low water concentration, and so we've got this drive all the way up a tree or a plant, and that can be several hundred feet if we're talking about the redwood trees. And what's that driving force behind it? Mostly the sun evaporating off the top. So that's xylem. Phloem moves sugar and water around in a plant, and it always moves it, this is what I would remember, it always moves it from the source to the sink. What does that mean? It moves it from where it's made to where it's being consumed, or from an area of high to an area of low concentration. Where is this found? Again, it's going to be found inside that, outside that vascular cambium in here in the bark. Now, what's the difference between phloem and xylem? Phloem is actually living cells, and so those living cells don't have a lot of the machinery because a lot of that actually sits in the companion cell. But they do have the sieve plate, which kind of keeps material from flowing between the two, but we can allow that sugar to flow. And this is a picture of, right here, that cell, that phloem cell, and then that companion cell. Now, where is the sugar going to move? The sugar is going to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. In other words, it's going to be produced in a cell. In this case, that could be the leaves. That's going to increase the amount of sugar, which will diffuse outside of the cell. That's going to create pressure out here, and that pressure is going to cause that sugar and that water to move to a different part of the plant. In this case, it would be a beet, so it's moving from those leaves. That sugar is eventually going to move its way down into that tuber or to that root at the bottom. Where does the water come from? Well, that water is recycled then, and so that water is recycled through the xylem on its way back up the leaf. And so that's how materials moved around in plants, those two different types of cells, xylem and phloem. And then remember those two different types of pressures. If we're talking about water, it's transpiration or evaporation at the top of the plant or the tree. And if it's phloem, that pressure comes from the cells that are actually creating the sugar. Again, that could switch. And so if we're talking about a tree in spring, there's going to be more sugar in the roots than there are going to be in the leaves. It's being consumed up there, so we're going to get a flow of that sugar, and that allows those trees to grow in the springtime.